Welcome to another episode of What is Hashimoto's with Dr. Martin Rutherford. To find out more on any of our topics, or for information on scheduling a consultation with Dr. Rutherford, please visit us at whatishashimotos.com. And now, here's Dr. Rutherford.
Okay, so today we're going to talk about, the question is, what are Hashimoto's versus hypothyroid symptoms? So this is a person who apparently hasn't been watching my stuff for very long. So we'll go through it. So, okay, so Hashimoto's is an autoimmune attack on your thyroid. All right, so your immune system attacks your thyroid and then it starts creating damage to the ability to make thyroid properly. And usually when you get the attack, it makes a lot of thyroid hormone, makes a lot more thyroid hormone. If you're attacking an enzyme called a thyroid peroxidase enzyme, that enzyme works with hydrogen peroxide and it pulls iodine into the system, it makes thyroid hormones, and when it gets attacked, it starts getting crazy and making way more hormone. That causes hyper symptoms. We'll talk about that in a second. You can also attack the thyroid tissue itself, not the enzyme, just damage the tissue. That just starts, as you've heard me say a million times, vomiting out. It just seems like the right word for that. Just vomiting out a lot of T4 and T3. Those are the hormones. You get hyper stuff. Okay. But Hashimoto's usually, I'd say 85% of the time or more, usually is first a hypothyroid. So here's how it goes. You have a thyroid problem. You have a thyroid that's working normally. And then somewhere along the line, we get an attack on our thyroid, and that attack just starts to attack the thyroid, whether it attacks the tissue or whether it attacks the enzyme. And it can be very, very low grade attack in the beginning, and often is. I just heard something. I think I was listening to a lecture which was citing research that said it takes about 7 years for the attack on the thyroid to start creating a full-blown Hashimoto's symptomatic picture. So in other words, you can have the attack for like 7 years, not even know you have it. Maybe even longer, but let's just use the 7 years. So now it's going like this, okay? And so it's kind of subtly beating up your thyroid, if you will, okay? And eventually you start getting tissue damage, and it's subtle tissue damage, and you start going into hypothyroid, usually first. Usually you go into hypothyroid. Sometimes this will all happen at once, but let's just keep it simple. First you do hypothyroid. In other words, your thyroid's getting beat up, it's not operating well enough, it's not making enough hormone, and you're tired and your hair is falling out. These are hypothyroid symptoms. Hair falling out, tired, think slow. Everything slows down. You start getting acid indigestion because your stomach's not making enough hydrochloric acid because the mechanism has slowed it down. That alters your entire digestive system. The next thing you have, constipation, because you have poor chemistry, constipation. Thyroid slows down the enteric nervous system. So that's the nervous system that makes your bowels move. Okay, next thing you know, you have constipation. It creates an inability of your gallbladder to work. So all of a sudden, maybe you start getting problems of digesting fatty foods. Maybe that adds to your constipation, but now you're not digesting your fats. So now you start getting dry skin because you're not getting those fats broken down. They're not getting absorbed. You can get a slow heartbeat, and let's see, and start putting on weight. Your metabolism goes down. You start putting on weight. You can get edema around your ankles, so you can get swelling around your ankles because maybe your heart's not pumping enough, maybe your liver's not working well enough, and so you can get, so everything slows down, so you can't get the liquids back up from your feet all the way up. And these are many of the hypothyroid symptoms. Now, Hashimoto's when you advance to Hashimoto's, it's because there's a part of the reason is the damage now starts to become a lot, and you still retain the hypothyroid symptoms, but intermittently now, when the attack reaches a threshold, I think would be the best way of putting it. Now all of a sudden you start vomiting out a lot of thyroid hormone from the damaged tissue, or making too much hormone from damaging this, from exacerbating this enzyme that now starts making more hormone. Now you start to add to the hypothyroid symptoms, you start to add heart palpitations because of too much thyroid hormone, inward tremors, you start to add night sweats, because it can affect the hormonal system. Thyroid has a very direct effect on your hormonal system. You start to add insomnia, just because it starts to fire up your adrenals. That affects your blood sugar. So these things start to cause insomnia, night sweats, inward tremors, irritable. And there's a small group of Hashimoto's patients that are hyperthyroid. They're actually more hyper than they are hypo. They're a small group. They actually will lose weight and not be able to put it on. Most Hashimoto's patients will actually put on weight. So the bottom line is that the hypothyroid, the diagnosis for Hashimoto's, for, let's say you were going to an endocrinologist and they were going to use a diagnostic code to get paid by the insurance companies for what they do, then one of the codes is Hashimoto's hypothyroiditis. So it's you have the immune attack, Hashimoto's, you have the hypothyroid, the slow stuff, and then itis means you have an inflammatory issue to the tissues of the thyroid itself. So you have both. So hypothyroid, and there are people who have hypothyroid without Hashimoto's. I keep reading different figures on it. The one I read last night was 90% of people who have hypothyroid actually are Hashimoto's, which would leave 10% who are actually hypothyroid, and you're just going to have the slow, the fatigue, the hair falling out. How could I forget that one? The hair falling out is a hypothyroid one. The weight gain is a hypothyroid one. And so I guess that's the delineation, if there is a delineation. It's more of a spectrum of damage over a period of time, and an advancement of damage that then ultimately causes you to go from just hypo into hypo and hyper symptoms, and a rare occasion, just hyper symptoms. So that's. I hope that I can see where the confusion comes in for sure, and wanting to know what is what, and that's why what I just explained is why the confusion comes in. So I hope that helps to answer that question.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of What is Hashimoto's? To find out more on any of our topics, or for information on scheduling a consultation with Dr. Rutherford, please visit us at whatishashimotos.com.